February 2006. Calder Racecourse, Miami. The Fasig-Tipton sale, one of the most prestigious 2-year-old auctions on the planet. The air inside that venue is thick. It smells like money, old leather, and ambition. Around the ring stand the most powerful figures in global thoroughbred racing. Bloodstock agents in tailored suits, billionaires with blank checks, people who buy horses the way the rest of us buy groceries. But tonight, 2 names loom above all the others. Coolmore Stud, the Irish empire that has shaped champions for decades. And Darley Stud, the racing operation backed by one of the wealthiest royal families in the world. 2 titans, 1 horse. The bidding opens. Numbers climb with a speed that makes the crowd go quiet. Not the quiet of boredom, the quiet of disbelief. 10 million, 12, 14. People stop breathing. Their hands rise. Numbers fall from the auctioneer's mouth like hammer blows. Then the gavel drops. $16 million. For a horse that had never run a single race, never faced a single competitor, never been tested by anything more demanding than a morning workout on a practice track. $16 million. The highest price ever paid for an untried 2-year-old thoroughbred at public auction. A world record, sealed in a single breath. And the question that would haunt racing for the next decade wasn't who won the bidding war. It was, what on earth did they actually buy? To understand how a horse with 0 race experience commands $16 million, you have to understand what racing's elite are really buying. They're not just buying a runner. They're buying a dynasty, a legacy, a name that will echo through bloodlines for 100 years. And on paper, this horse was as close to royalty as the sport had ever seen. His pedigree traced back to Northern Dancer, arguably the most influential sire of the 20th century, whose descendants have dominated racing on both sides of the Atlantic for generations. And then there was Secretariat, the 1973 Triple Crown champion, who didn't just win races, he shattered them. A horse so physically extraordinary that those who studied him still struggle to find the right words. This horse carried both of those bloodlines. On paper, he wasn't just bred to run, he was bred to dominate. But pedigree alone doesn't move a room full of billionaires to $16 million. Yet what truly ignited the firestorm was what happened in the days before that auction, at an event called the Breeze Up. Young prospects, most of them 2 years old, are asked to sprint a short distance, typically an eighth of a mile, in front of buyers, agents, and scouts. It's a snapshot, a preview, a horse's one shot to announce itself before the bidding begins. This horse's snapshot was electric. He ran that eighth of a mile in 9.8 seconds. For a horse in a pre-sale workout with no competitive pressure, no rival pushing him, it was, by any measure, freakish. The kind of number that makes experienced bloodstock agents pause and look at each other in silence. And so, the perfect storm assembled itself. The royal pedigree, the blazing workout time, and perhaps most dangerously, the ego. Because when Coolmore and Darley go to war at an auction, it stops being purely about the horse. It becomes about reputation, about dominance, about who blinks first. Nobody blinked. The bubble grew. And nobody in that room stopped to ask what would happen when it finally burst. He was named the Green Monkey. And from almost the very beginning, before he ever set foot on a racetrack, things started going wrong. Before his career could even begin, the Green Monkey suffered a serious physical setback. The result was devastating in its simplicity. Time lost, momentum gone. The clock that every racehorse runs against, the short window between 2 and 4 years of age when a thoroughbred is at peak competitive fitness, had already begun ticking away while he stood in a stall, recovering. By the time he finally made his debut as a 3-year-old, the racing world had been waiting and whispering for over a year. This was the moment. $16 million stepping onto a track at last. The bloodstock industry held its breath. He did not win. He ran again. He did not win. In his entire career, 3 races, total, the Green Monkey's best result was a single third-place finish. Not a victory, not a runner-up, a third, in 3 starts. Before his connections quietly decided that enough was enough. Sit with those numbers for a moment, because they deserve to be heard clearly. $16 million invested, 3 races run, a best finish of 3rd place. Total career prize money earned, $10,440. $10,440. That is not a rounding error. That is not a footnote. That is the full return on the most expensive thoroughbred auction purchase in history. For every dollar spent acquiring the green monkey, approximately 0.6 of a cent came back. The math is not just brutal, it is almost absurd. And perhaps the most haunting part? Nobody did anything wrong. There was no fraud, no deception. The pedigree was genuine. The workout time was real. The horse simply, as horses so cruelly and so frequently do, failed to translate potential into performance when it mattered most. Because a stopwatch on a training track and a racetrack full of rivals are 2 entirely different worlds. When it became clear that the Green Monkey's racing career was finished, his connections faced the question every owner of a failed thoroughbred eventually confronts, but rarely at this scale. What do you do with a $16 million horse that couldn't win a race? You send him to the breeding shed. Because while his racing record was a catastrophe, those bloodlines hadn't changed. The DNA was still extraordinary on paper. And in thoroughbred racing, the breeding industry runs on hope, on the belief that greatness skipped a generation can resurface in the next. He was retired to stud. His initial fee was set at $5,000 per covering. $5,000 for a horse that cost $16 million. That single number tells the entire story better than any statistic could. The market, ruthless and unsentimental as it always is, had rendered its verdict. The racing world, which had inflated his value to the stratosphere on the basis of a 9-second workout, repriced him with cold precision based on what he had actually proven on a racetrack. He did sire offspring. Some of them won races, modest victories at modest tracks. Nothing that set the racing world alight. Nothing that justified even a fraction of the faith placed in him that February night in Miami. In 2016, at just 14 years old, the Green Monkey passed away from laminitis, a painful condition of the hooves that claimed him well before old age. He never escaped the shadow of what he was supposed to be. He was simply a horse, fast, beautifully bred, and ultimately fragile in ways that no amount of money could predict or prevent. The story of the Green Monkey rippled through the bloodstock industry with the force of a cautionary earthquake. Buyers became measurably more skeptical about staking fortune-level sums on 2-year-old prospects based on a single dazzling workout. The breeze-up time was re-examined. Agents began asking harder questions. The ceiling on ego-driven bidding wars shifted. His name became a reference point, dropped in auction tents whenever a number climbed too fast, too high, on too little evidence. His story exposed something the sport had always quietly known, but never been forced to confront so publicly. The gap between what a horse looks like and what it actually is can be $16 million wide. Speed can be timed. Pedigree can be traced. Confirmation can be scored by experts with decades of experience. And none of it can guarantee what happens when a horse steps into the gate alongside rivals who were all bred and trained and dreamed over with the same desperate intensity. The dirt doesn't care about measurements. It only cares about what happens when the gates open, when the ground comes up fast under flying hooves, and when the pressure, real, unscripted, and merciless, finally arrives. No dollar amount has ever bought a guarantee of that. The Green Monkey, the most expensive ghost in racing history, proved it in the most expensive way imaginable.